2014, People and Power revealed the shameful treatment of disabled people in Romania's state-run care homes. Our investigation also raised questions about why the EU was funding some of those institutions. Now there are fresh allegations about neglect and mistreatment, this time not just in Romania, but in neighbouring countries. In the second of two special reports, Sarah Spiller has been to Bulgaria to find out more.
In the first part of our investigation into the treatment of disabled people in European Union countries, we revealed shocking evidence of abuse, neglect, and incarceration in state institutions. For our second film, we start in Bulgaria, another country with an appalling past when it comes to the treatment of people with disabilities, now praised as a model for using millions in EU money to move children from institutions and a way forward for other member states. One controversial part of the reform is the creation of what are called small group homes. The claim is that these places for up to 15 children and youngsters are about a family environment, community living. But during this investigation, we gained first-hand evidence from inside Bulgaria's group homes, evidence which raises disturbing questions. Not only about abuse and neglect, but about whether these places really can change life for Europe's disabled citizens.
These are beautiful, brand spanking new settings, but they still remain institutions. People can't come and go. They still do not have their autonomy, their basic autonomy. And we say that this is the wrong approach, both ethically, morally, but also legally under international law.
July this year, and we're meeting a team from the US charity Disability Rights International. In recent months, they've been inside 24 group homes and day centres across this country. They tell us what they've seen has left them profoundly shocked.
What we've seen is the perpetuation of neglect, abuse, and segregation. It is human lives thrown away.
Despite welcoming interiors, in one home, they find youngsters in a corridor, one naked. Nearby, another young woman.
This woman who has Down syndrome has been sitting on this potty for the last half hour while we've been here. The whole hallway, it's overwhelming stench.
And then this.
So this man is in isolation, naked, in a locked door.
While one staff member seemed unaware he was locked in, another suggested it was because they were short of staff whilst lunch was prepared. In another home, a young woman is tied in a wheelchair. It's too big and inappropriate. She could have a purpose-built chair, but only if someone else pays for it.
She weighs 18 kilograms. And how old, we said? She's 26, 27, weighs 18 kilograms.
Later, she's untied and put in a cot.
She bangs herself, she bangs the crib. We're told that there's no specific behavior programs for that. It's just a lack of stimulation.
This 12-year-old boy has splints on his arms to restrict his movement.
They are to protect him from biting himself. He can't bend his arms, so he can't use his arms to eat, and they're feeding him.
They also find this.
This is a cage. We have to figure out why and when it's used.
This is the young boy who is shut in the pen at night, seen here with one of the charity investigators, Melanie. Staff say they fear for his safety when there aren't enough workers to look after him. The charity team is told the boy is blind.
25 years ago, we documented cages in these institutions. They've gone from being the old wire cage to a nice piece of furniture. They blend in. They almost look like you could have bought it at IKEA. But what it was is bars, wooden bars, totally humiliating for any child, and they're put there precisely because there's not the staff. It's an outrage that cages would be used today in group homes.
Slavka Kukova from the Bulgarian Helsinki Commission is part of an academic network that's advised the European Commission on disability issues.
These small group homes were supposed to provide the level of care and the environment that's close to the family one. But the majority of the group homes actually repeated the large institutional model. So the big part of the money was spent on buildings, on equipment, on furniture, but not on salaries, on training, on supervision or guidance of the people who were supposed to develop this process and to work with these children directly.
This argument about inadequate staffing and training goes to the heart of care for young people in Bulgaria's group homes. Travelling here, we were told of concerns over safety if there aren't enough workers. We met two young women living in a group home who shared their experiences. They asked us to disguise their identities.
Това, че не ми харесва, че сме смесени по заболяване. Не се чувстваме толкова защитени там. Но има и с тежко физически увреждания, които изискват повече грижи. И ако примерно някой спадне в криза, персонално, който е сменен, не може да обърне внимание на този, който има повече нужда от. Това е една от причини. Няма достатъчно персонал. По един човек на смяна кара.
Да. Те са присмени по един човек.
Hundreds of millions in EU money has flowed from the coffers of Brussels to create group homes, not only in Bulgaria, but in other European member states. More is poised to be given in the future. But one question raised from our investigation: what EU officials know about the places they funded.
The EU just agreed to whatever Bulgaria suggested. The auditors who came here, they were more interested in whether the money was spent. They were not interested in whether the money follows the child or the person in need.
This footage is from another group home in Bulgaria, which has received funding from the European Union. It was part of evidence gathered by the NGO Disability Rights International for a recent report. In the corner of the room are pens, and in one of them a young man is lying. He has no bedding, nothing to do or distract him. In another centre that's also been in receipt of EU funds, the charity's investigators find a boy suffering from the condition hydrocephalus, which causes fluid to collect in the brain.
There's a child in the back that has an enormous head from hydrocephalus. They won't let us get closer.
This is a treatable condition if the child had been given a shunt. But 3 years after having moved from the institution to this so-called group home, the child had not been assessed to determine whether or not they received, medical care.
In the same centre, where severely disabled children and young people need constant medical care, a concern about how they're positioned in beds. Melanie from the charity has questions about the way this young woman is lying. She's concerned it might lead to pressure ulcers.
They're not relieving any of the pressure on any of the muscles, any of the bones, any of the joints.
Okay. We also saw many children completely neglected, thin, emaciated, biting themselves, rocking back and forth, chewing their fingers.
But during our investigations here, allegations not only of neglect, evidence of violence against disabled youngsters in a group home which received EU money in the past. We came to Gabrovo with human rights lawyer Aneta Genova, who's visited a range of group homes in this country. In the outskirts of the city, a home for around 10 youngsters, a place that's been the focus of concern over abuse. Footage leaked to the press in January 2018. A worker repeatedly strikes a resident lying in a bed. She walks round and shouts aggressively at the youngster. We understand staff workers involved in this incident were removed. What did you make of that footage when you saw it?
It's my first thought was that this is everywhere. It's not only there. In this kind of settings, the violation is something which happen.
You're talking about human rights violations?
Yes,
abuse.
exactly.
When you go around and you visit group homes like this, what kind of information do you collect about the quality of care for the residents in these homes?
First of all, is the observation, how the staff is acting with the children. Usually it's something which cannot be hidden, because they are accepting this as normal. And for me, all these signs are the most important. If somebody is ready to hit the child in front of me or my colleagues, it's you can imagine what happens when we are not there.
In Bulgaria's capital, Aneta introduces us to a man who knows all about how institutional life can breed abuse. Georgi Zernov lived in one of the country's most notorious institutions, where he says for 7 years he was forcibly medicated and put in isolation for lengthy periods. He managed to leave when he was 28.
Друго е между институцията и на улицата. Те са два вида. Или да живееш в дома затворен, или да избягаш да живееш на улицата, или да намериш смъртта си в институцията или тук. И аз избрах едното. Да съм на улицата. Да съм между обществото, както намеря. Но намерих и работа, с което започнах и да работя по етапно начин.
Georgi took us to the institution where he used to live to find out if anything's changed since he left. The institution is home for over 80 people with disabilities. The director told us we couldn't take our cameras inside. But we were allowed in, where the director revealed plans for new group homes. Up to 8 will be built with funding contribution from the EU. But not, it seems, in the village beyond. The homes will be built in the grounds nearby. Outside, Georgi gave us his reaction.
Между обществото трябва да бъдат, а не да се тергират.
Away from the institution, Georgi tells us of his concern that there'll be no real change for disabled residents.
Кофти е за хората, които ще живеят отново, среда, която ще направят нова. Но няма да се променят нещата.
The fear for disability campaigners is that European Union money fuels a model that's far from being the kind of community living first envisaged when there was a clamour to close down institutions in this country. On a journey to the city of Stara Zagora, leading disability advocate Kapka Panayotova is furious about how she says money's been spent in her country.
They have to keep this propaganda up. To say, no, we didn't waste this money. That makes me furious, not just angry, because it's a lie.
Disabled from a young age, Kapka has never lived in an institution. But today we're going to see her friend Lucy, who still does.
She's small, very fragile looking, and at the same time so tough, so determined to to live her own life. Why this wonderful woman, so capable, so willing to live her own life, is still stuck to this bloody institution.
Outside the city of Stara Zagora, we arrive at a state home for over 100 disabled people. Kapka's friend Ludmila, Lucy to her friends, is there to meet us. Lucy was put in institutional care at a year old. She's been in this place since 1995. It is large, bleak, impersonal, and there's a set regime.
This is the dining room where everybody is expected to come and have meal. Breakfast, lunch, dinner.
She shares a small room with her friend Christina. Both women are published writers, observing and recording what institutional life can be like for other residents here.
Както се изрази един човек, ставам сутрин, пия кафе и чакам да дойде вечерта. Не е добре толкова много хора да живеят на едно място, но някак си като че ли това не може да се разбере от хората, които управляват.
Lucy works as a librarian, but when it comes to living in this institution, she says she's caught in a vicious circle. Her earnings mean she's above the threshold for state housing, but she can't afford to pay for adaptations she needs in a privately rented apartment.
Държавата така прави, че човек да се почувства по-добре да живее в някоя институция, отколкото да излезе някъде навън. Защото просто, няма къде да отидеш.
Officials have suggested Lucy moves to a group home, a suggestion, she says, utterly at odds with how she wants to live her life.
Искам жилище, в което да живея, да посрещам гостите си, да разполагам с лично пространство. Те и не могат да разберат, че то е нормален живот, който те го искат и аз го искам.
In a statement, the Bulgarian government dismissed the charity Disability Rights International's conclusions as
tendentious and not representative, aiming to underestimate the process of deinstitutionalization in Bulgaria.
They said they'd closed 116 specialised institutions, and the main focus was now the
prevention of child abandonment and reintegration into a family.
As a result, they said,
a very small number of the children with disabilities in Bulgaria are placed in residential care.
They rejected suggestions money for group homes was spent on buildings rather than staffing. Most reform is funded by the state, they said.
Over 450 million euros has been allocated from the state budget.
Adding just 260 million came from EU funds.
We strongly deny the statement that there are human rights violations in Bulgarian group homes.
October this year, and disability advocates are in Brussels for a conference. One of their key demands is that the European Union stands by an important UN convention on the rights of people with disabilities to live independently. It's called the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the UN CRPD, and it was ratified by the European Union in 2010. But campaigners claim building new group homes for disabled children and adults is at odds with the rights outlined in the convention. Stephen Allen from the NGO Validity asks an EU Commission official about the practice of the EU putting money into these homes.
Is there a genuine commitment on the part of the Commission to stop those practices which genuinely have perpetrated segregation across Central and Eastern Europe?
Thank you very much. We are working on that. Because
the official says he too is fighting on this issue, but it's no good everyone blaming each other.
So we are fighting, you are fighting in your place, I am fighting in my place, we are fighting. But blaming each other will never, result in anything.
So should the EU put money into group homes? And where does the United Nations stand on this? We caught up with the UN rapporteur in Norway.
In practice, for us, what it's important is not the size of the place, it's not how the place look like. It's actually what is the culture of that place where people with disabilities are locked, deprived of their rights, and live an institutional life.
The EU has put millions into family-type homes, small group homes, where there are serious concerns that the culture that exists is still one of an institution and people simply don't leave. Is that wrong in your view?
Is that wrong? That's wrong, definitely.
During the course of this two-part investigation, evidence we've gathered in Romania, Hungary and Bulgaria has led to serious questions about the European Union and the right of people with disabilities to live in the community. And about abuse in institutions and state homes that have been in receipt of EU money. We put those questions to an EU Commission director, starting by asking about human rights violations. And one of the things that we've heard is that when the Commission is told about abuses, they fail to take responsibility for it.
The fact is that when we speak about specific cases, if they occur in XY member state, the national authorities are the one who are responsible for the state of play, are responsible for the status of the persons with disabilities.
Is that good enough though? I mean, this is European taxpayers' money going into institutions where vulnerable EU citizens are being abused. Now, you will be aware of this particular example, which is Top House in Hungary, subject to a very long complaint to the Commission.
I'm not going to comment because I'm not going to go into individual cases, and I think we are here to set the example and to set the principles.
Has the Commission actually sanctioned any countries where they found out abuses? Have they taken money away? Have they said, stop it? What have you actually done?
Abuses are not acceptable under any
Will you look
conditions.
into it there? I mean, will you look into some of this?
Without any question about it. So, and as soon as, if we would get the information on such a, believe me, we would go deeply and look into what is happening.
Do you not have people that could marry up human rights reports with funding? I mean, it would seem the simplest thing to do.
I don't want us to get into the game between connection of EU funding and abuses.
I mean, we have heard evidence
should we?
of abuses in group homes that have been in receipt of EU funds. I mean, we have. That would clearly seem to be something that the EU should be interested in, but you don't want to link the two things. But can I just say, I've got another... No, please. At this point, an advisor interrupted off camera.
Of course, we don't comment on individual cases, but of course we have instruments in place for EU funds for possible abuses.
Exactly.
There ensued a discussion about what legal remedies the EU could use in cases where there are abuses.
Disabilities and institutions. I've not agreed to be filmed.
Well, no, but you're sitting there talking, so frankly you are. I mean, you've just interrupted our interview.
I'm just reminding of one point. When there are abuses with the funds, with the EU funds,
yep,
on a general level, we have, of course, clear instruments to address them.
Okay, so how often has that happened then, these use of these clear instruments? I mean, just give me facts here.
So
when is it being used? Yeah?
In the European Social Fund, we did not have any reports of such a reason to stop funding.
The director told us that member states do have to produce strategic documents when they want EU funds.
We have been following each stage of the development of the documents and pushing our member states to do it in accordance with UN Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disability.
You brought up the UN CRPD, which is obviously very significant convention. Now, one contention is that the EU, in funding group homes, is not funding independent living, it's funding mini institutions which have all the characteristics of big institutions, and that should stop.
Well, the UN Convention does not define what independent living means. It is, as you rightly pointed, human right approach and the right-based choice that the person with disability should make. So in this respect, it is indeed important to ask persons with disability what do they want and how do they want to live.
Why not once and for all say, we're going to stick to the convention, we're going to push community living, which is an EU policy, and get on with it?
This is absolutely what EU
has been... try to split hairs about different interpretations.
EU has been saying, and EU is also fully aware of our responsibilities and our competencies when it comes to the independent living. So instead of trying to put me in a position of really not doing anything, I wish you would recognize what we have been doing and that we have been really doing a lot. But the clear message that I think should be sent and should be really visible is that EU pays a lot of attention, cares a lot, and will do everything that people are being deinstitutionalized.
A new European Union budget was agreed this November. Meanwhile, in Bulgaria, disability organisations are taking the European Commission to court in a bid to stop EU money going into dozens more residential homes for disabled people.